They don't go for salary. That's and within the university system. No, I must place the unions in proper pathway for
Hello and welcome to the program. After months of back and forth, President Muhammadu Buhari finally opened dialogue with elders and leaders of the country's oil-rich Niger-Delta region last Tuesday at the presidential villa in Abuja. Now, 49 representatives comprising traditional rulers, political leaders and elders of the region attended the talks. And at the end of it, they presented a 16-point demand to the government on how to bring about lasting peace in the region. Part of their demands include demilitarization of the region, active participation of indigents of the area in the oil business, reopening of the amnesty program, the commencement of the Maritime University of Okarenkoko, the relocation of operational headquarters of oil companies to the region, etc. Now take a listen to what some of the leaders said after the meeting, as well as the Minister of State for Petroleum, Ibe Kachuku, shedding light on the government side.
The meeting was arranged by the Minister of State Petroleum, and he accepted it. And I would say that it was when he approached us that he had been discussing with the President about our meeting him to discuss what the way forward. We also accepted. We agreed that we should meet.
It was fairly good, fairly civilized dialogue between all the parties. I did make a speech in terms of what the federal government directions will be. The President gave his ideas in terms of what his thought processes were. I think it was a frank conversation. It is the beginning of a process. We had over 100 Niger-Delta representatives led by Elder Statesman Chief Edwin Clark at this meeting. So it was very buoyantly attended. Opinions given were very honest, very frank to the point. It was a very civil relationship. But I think at the end of the day, we exchanged enough thought processes to go back to drawing board to begin a process of work. They asked for a proper funding of Niger-Delta Ministry, which they believe should be the sitting point for development in the area. And they did ask for some level of support for the IDPs, for displaced individuals who were in the Niger-Delta area, who had moved out of their corridors because of all the militancy that was going on there. And of course, finally, they did ask for business opportunities for the people in the region, especially the award of blocks. To oil blocks, to indigents and state governments.
In the last 2.5 months, almost 3 months, I don't think we have had any real issues with the Niger-Delta Avengers. Because I know that after the meeting of 19th of August, the stakeholders meeting that was led by our elder statesman Chief E.K. Clark, they actually keyed into that stakeholders meeting and have since then we've not had any real issues with them. It's important that we put this on the paper, and it is our hope that we'll continue with the consultation, and they are giving the others the mandate to speak on their behalf in meetings that would follow through. I do know that we have had a few issues on the land area now, not within the waters. It's been mainly on the land area. Because some of these groups believe that they are not being carried, and that to a very large extent those in the creeks have been given some prominence. Nobody has been given any prominence. The negotiations going on, the engagements going on, it's not about money sharing. It's about talking about the future of the Niger Delta people and what we need to do in terms of development, in terms of empowerment, in terms of partnership, and in terms of presence of the oil companies within the Niger Delta area, rather than offices being driven from far off, and many other issues that have been raised. So lightly, the Niger Delta Avengers have lightly shielded their sword, and things are moving on well, I can truly tell you.
The youth who have dropped their arms and demilitarized are now been sent for training, and they come back and they have no jobs. What are you pushing them to? To use their new skills and go back to the creeks? No. So the disengagement, to make sure that They either formed into cooperatives to do farming or fishing or doing something gainful. So we really need to engage the youth who have been trained by the amnesty program. In addition, you know, the Ogoni situation, for instance, is one of many. So while you are doing the cleanup in Ogoni, this should be extended to other parts also. And water supply is very essential because the United Nations Environment Program has declared that the water is unfit for consumption, for human consumption. So all these are things which add up to what makes the people of Niger-Delta, although they laugh and act and smile, beneath that frown and smile they are wearing a frown. So that is the situation. They're really feeling cheated and shortchanged. So these are all been pointed out. The federal government should bring out a team to go there, have a look, see, confirm all that we are saying, and see that these things are addressed.
All right, joining me now to discuss more on this Niger-Delta talks that is going on, because it's ongoing. The talks did not just end with that meeting with President Buhari. We understand it's going to continue. Joining me to continue that discussion now is a member of the Pan-Niger-Delta Forum, Mr. Tony Oranta. Thank you very much, Mr. Oranta, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
For you, how successful would you say the talks you had with the government, with President Buhari, of course, there? How successful would you say that talk was?
Well, we must, to really answer that effectively, we have to put it against the background of the reality that has been existing. For example, for over 4 months, especially, government has been saying we are in negotiations with the militants. But there were no negotiations.
Nothing was
undergoing. No. We were trying to build channels. Certain of us, part of the PANDEF initiative, were reaching out and were being reached out to by different government officials. But these now helped create government's perception that there wasn't unity in the region, and there were too many people attempting to eschew relevance.
But that was a problem at the initial stage.
It was a big problem. So the fact that we had a meeting with the president, with the governors represented, with members of the National Assembly present, with the cabinet present, with the international community fully supportive of the process, we now know that channels have been opened for negotiation. What is left is for the president to name his negotiation team. But now, that was what we ended as saying,
okay,
this is what we would like you to do right now. But we had already anticipated that, not just knowing President Buhari's mindset, but he's the president of Nigeria. He's not going to just announce on the spot. So we see it as hopeful, and as I said to somebody, the glass is half full, not half empty.
So how will the negotiation go forward from here? What, of course, as you've said, you expect the president to name a team. Now, who will that team? Will that team be negotiating with these leaders who were at the State House?
Now, that is the point.
Yes, because it's a large team. If you ask me.
No. That was PANDEF, and really, I've heard them say things like nearly 100-man delegation. No, it wasn't even up to half that. In fact, we were 49 in all. But then the place was filled up with all kinds of aides of the presidency and so on. But even having said 49, that's still too large a team for a negotiation.
So PANDEF will also have to set up its own team?
We already have a team which we will name at the appropriate time. What we had hoped at the best for was that the president would say, okay, maybe the intelligence security heads are going to lead my negotiation team, and the Minister of Petroleum, the Minister of Niger-Delta, etc. will be part of that negotiation team. And now our team is going to consist of X number of people. And so we now say, okay, sir, our team, which we have ready, will trim it down to whatever number your team is. We have a team, we are ready to match the president's number. We've got people ready. If he has a team of 20, we have 20. If he says it's got to be a small team of 10 or 5, we have 5. The important thing is that our team must represent the wishes of the people of the Niger-Delta. For example, that's one of our quarrels with the fact that the Minister of Petroleum and the presidency went ahead and announced the 7 big wins even before this meeting. And in the 7 big wins, for example, you will notice that they said they had downgraded the National Maritime University.
Well, the minister actually corrected that.
But now, the minister has told us, and the president has affirmed by assent, because the ministers told us in his presence, without him demurring, they have assured us that the National Maritime University is on course, and that is one of the key issues that brought about the insurgency, this latest one.
And that is quite true.
So if we can resolve that, and I see that we have resolved that, only the next things are how do we create safe passage, because definitely in the negotiation there has to be one person at least that will represent the armed youths. We cannot say we will speak for all of them.
Because we did not see any representative, so to speak, from the armed group. Say, for instance, like the Niger-Delta Avengers.
Even I was in touch with them even during the meeting. And other people have been appointed. We created 2 teams. We created what we called Team A. And that Team A was to liaise with government to bring about whatever negotiation channels opening that we could. Team B was to liaise with the CRICs, with the different groups or armed groups, to get them, first of all, to buy into PANDEF's position, to get them also to let us know exactly what they want, and to know that when we speak, we are speaking on their behalf. And if you have noticed the trend of things before, if we were not speaking on their behalf, there would have been probably an explosion while the meeting was ongoing.
But we also know that groups like, especially that group, the Niger-Delta Greenland Mandate or so, they're just not on board. They are not on board with what is going on.
I think they are. You see, there's... I have noticed in my study of war and history that there are false flag operations. There are operations sometimes are not even undertaken by the so-called militants in the CRICs. And there are operations undertaken by them to expedite or emphasize on certain points and issues. So I do not know for sure, but I wouldn't put it past a possible mischief playing either on the part of government or on the part of these young men in the CRICs. But whichever way it is, I believe that now that it is clear that we have started moving forward, we have started building confidence, and that the presidency is at last ready to listen to us, because the major issue at the beginning was, oh well, you had a president there for about 7 years when he couldn't resolve certain things. Are we going to come now and pay for it? Now we have said, whether the president was from our region and from my village or my family and stayed there for 10 years, doesn't matter. If he didn't do certain things, and it is right and necessary and needful for us to do it now, let's do it now. We can't say because we are going to let it be to show, that would be cutting our noses to spite our faces.
Now, we saw PANDEF yesterday. The leaders now make a 16-point demand. Let's talk about some of those demands. For instance, the Maritime University, as you've said, is very key, and the minister, of course, has confirmed that that project will go on. I have actually seen that project. It's something massive, and quite a surprise that it was stopped in the first place. And apart from that, there's also the issue of inclusivity. What exactly that you want the people of the Niger Delta now to be, you know, to participate in the oil business, so to speak. You want oil blocks to be given to indigents of the Niger Delta. You want them to take active part. Could you expatiate on that?
Well, this needs also to go back down history. In 2008, the insurgency peaked. In 2009, it peaked. And at that time, the late President Yaradua granted the amnesty, and everything seemed to settle down. But you see, what folks didn't realize is that the amnesty proclamation and the post-negotiations had 5 fingers. And the 5 fingers included one which was disarmament, demobilization, rehabilitation and reintegration. But that has been the only finger that has been concentrated upon. The other 4 fingers had 4 subcommittees set up by the late President Yaradua. In fact, I was a member of 2 of those committees. And we were going to do quite a bit. And the president was very supportive. He had the political will and he was eager to do that. We must confess that the administration that took over from him, which happened to be a Niger Delta taking over, funnily enough, did not consolidate on those gains. That Yaradua had already conceived and started. Rather than even moving forward, all the other 4 fingers were nullified virtually by the committees never being called to meetings anymore, or steps taken to move them forward. Now, so at the end of the day, what we are asking for today are the same things we were asking for in 2009, which those subcommittees were set up to address. So really, we didn't need to list all of them. In the first page of the presentation, we had said to the president, just return to the 2009 template of the Yaradua program or plan, and everything will be resolved. And the way we had peace just by doing one finger, when you do all 4, because the danger of that one finger was it looked like there was a rewarding of violence and violence only. Only armed agitators were being taken care of. So the communities were not being taken care of. The issues of social justice and law were not being resolved. The very basic area of fiscal federalism and the restructuring of the country was not being looked into. The lopsidedness of ownership of either oil blocks or oil allocations or related businesses were not being addressed. Communities were still not participating in the business of oil and gas. And worst of all, the despoliation of the environment was increasing. A lot of people have said to me, why does the NDA blow up things and worsen the environment? You need to see what the environment is as it is. So to them, they say, it's not worsening, it's already bad. It's not going to get, we won't see any change. People have said that to get Ogoni back in shape, Ogoni is the least impacted place. To get it back in shape will take about 30 years. Now, so these young men say, so that means to get our own places back in shape will take maybe another 50 years, and you people are still worsening things. Okay, we'll spoil all of it. Let all of us die. We know it is not the best approach. And that is why a few of us who want to be seen as being more level-headed, not less militant, but more cerebral, have come together to bring moderation to bear and say, okay, you've got a point, you made a case, and so on, but now let's take it forward from here the way we did in 2009.
Let's talk about something else. Corruption is also a factor in all of this. I mean, in the past, let's face it, some monies had been spent in the Niger Delta in the past, but corruption is also a big issue, even among some of the so-called leaders. What will be different this time, for instance, if the government, and as the minister has been saying, you know, oil companies and the others come together, for instance, and start pumping in money into that region to turn around the face of the infrastructure in that region. Now, what will be different this time? How are we sure the situation is not going to end up like we had seen in the past?
Now, it's first of all, there's a general aspect. We know that corruption is endemic in Nigeria. So we should not expect the Niger Delta to be the saint of the country. I could say the northern leaders have led the country 90% of the time we have been in existence as an independent nation. And I go to the north, I do not see much to really show for all the monies that have been expended in the north over the years, over the decades. So also in the Niger Delta, there is endemic corruption. But worsened by, in the case of the leadership, especially of the cliques, by when in 2009, as I said, there were these post-amnesty negotiations and the 5 committees were thrown up. And emphasis was now laid on DDRR. There was something that they did wrong. We in the Niger Delta Technical Committee, which was set up by President Yaradua before the amnesty, we were the ones who asked, or rather advised, that the government should propose amnesty. Now, what we had said, when you start rehabilitating and all that, do not beg money to it. We were not in support of stipends in the first place.
And eventually that was exactly
we were not in support of, we said you have to get community buy-in into the surveillance and protection of oil facilities, etc. Government now decided on its own, probably because of its own corrupt bent in the first place,
just give it to
start giving it to individuals. Those individuals became multi-trillionaires in some cases, lording it over communities, and now taking over control from even the traditional institutions, the leadership in the region, even the elected offices. But if you notice what we said in yesterday's 16-point presentation, we said government do not give surveillance, etc., to individuals. Give it to communities and do not pay communities money. What you do is you employ members of the community as picked by the community, overseen by the community, so they have a sense of responsibility. They are keeping what is happening there. It is in their best interest to protect it, and nobody is becoming excessive.
And the money goes to the community and not to individuals.
Exactly. And when you get these oil companies are the biggest culprits of this whole issue, the IOCs. Because you will be surprised that in a state like Bayelsa, there is not one single presence of any IOC. With all the oil that they're producing, they don't have regional offices. Even offices, they do not have. What they have, they will go down there, you see Porter Cabins, Shell, and so on. So everybody works from outside the region, even before the insecurity set in. So this was part, maybe it was not the best way to go about it by now creating insecurity and give them a reason to stay out the more. But this was part of the quarrel that the young men used to have, that you go out, you bring all the workers, even unskilled labor, into our communities. And at the weekend, you will now take them all out. So they live a luxurious life and they are there. We must bring in the social aspect. They are there getting their girls pregnant, spreading HIV, and in every way treating the youth of the place with contempt, because the youth don't have these opportunities, don't have the exposure, and these are issues that we hope. That's why what we expect, what we have asked from the president, is not a negotiation team of like one group. It's a negotiation team that will be a primary group, but we'll have subgroups, subcommittees, sort of. Okay, the subcommittee to talk about host communities' participation in oil revenues, not necessarily oil blocks. What President Yar'Adua in that time, in his wisdom, agreed to was that, look, if Danjuma owns blocks in the Niger-Delta, he must revert some of the ownership of those blocks to the communities within which those blocks operate. They have to have something, a percentage
of the revenue accruing.
Of the revenues are accruing. That if this happens now, and you now get them to create cooperatives and have them, you train them how to administer those monies in such ways that they will be creating legacies and institutions for their future generations. It will be something that is better than just handing out, doling out stipends. Or making, telling a man, you are in charge of this place, we'll pay you 50 billion. And you pay him all the 50 billion up front. What even gives you the incentive to still monitor that place? And all the other younger men now say, oh, so he got paid all that money because he was blowing up this place before. Okay, we will start blowing the place up. That's why the new group you talk about, Greenland and so on, they are part of a brand new area of the Niger-Delta that is coming out and saying, it seems you are only talking about certain areas. We are now going to create relevance. Stop thinking that we are peaceful people. There are normally peaceful people who normally don't react. They are reacting now very awkwardly.
I mean, but how quickly do you expect things to go from here?
If I know that this administration has talked a lot about body language. If the body language of ministers like Kachuku and Usane Uguru and Brigadier General Boro, plus, of course, Rotimi and Meichi are to be taken seriously. We expect that before the end of the first half of this month, the government will come out with its negotiation team, and we should even have had the first meeting between that team and Pandev's team representing the region, so that we start working out modalities as to how we can move the negotiations further, and so we can be able to ask these young people to extend, first of all, the ceasefire, and then government has to also buy in by letting them come to an armistice. It has to be both ways. There must be a ceasefire on both sides, which is not to say the criminality should be condoned. When we are asking for demilitarization of the area, that is not to say we are saying withdraw the military for the area. We're saying stop occupation of communities. Because right now, occupation is leading to a lot of abuses, including killings, rapings, harassment, and a host of other things. We're saying pull these people out. The Navy is here in Lagos, for example. The Army is here in Lagos, but there's no occupation of Lagos. They, however, are securing Lagos. Yes, that's what we want in the Niger-Delta.
Mr. Tony Waranta, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, I will be discussing something else. Every day, every hour, and every minute, news break in Nigeria. Things happen so fast, it's most times difficult to track and comprehend them. But that's what we do right here on DEJI360. 2015, would you want to come back again?
It's like asking Jesus Christ if he knew he was going to die, will you want to come back as the savior of the world again?
We do not just help you track the stories, we break them down, explore all the angles, analyze the issues so that you can fully comprehend the stories and use them to make the right decisions.